it in black and white that's going to set everything right. Now, I'm here to tell you, dog, we already knew this. Caitlin Clark effect was going to work out tremendously for the league. Now, the numbers are starting to come out. Exactly how much to Caitlin Clark single-handedly, because everybody likes to give credit to other people. Angel went on a whole campaign for 2 years telling everybody, it ain't just her, it's me too. It's other people. Don't forget about me and my hype, my fans. I'm here to tell you, one face, one name, one effect just helped y'all finally get in the green, at least for 1 year. That is the Caitlin Clark effect.
Numbers don't lie. And the numbers that just dropped are forcing everyone in the WNBA ecosystem to confront a reality they've been dancing around for months. For the first time in the league's 28-year history, the WNBA generated enough revenue to trigger the revenue-sharing clause in their collective bargaining agreement. That's $8 million about to be distributed across all 13 teams. And if you've been paying attention to who's selling jerseys, who's driving ratings, and whose trading card just sold for $660,000, you know exactly who made this possible.
All 13 teams will receive a total of $8 million to disperse amongst players. WNBA made enough money in 2025. Katie Barnes was the one who broke this story. This is major news. This is Katie Barnes here, and I'm telling you right now, I know some of y'all is wondering, what the hell do CC got to do with this?
Katie Barnes broke this story on Sunday morning, and the details are significant. Under the 2020 CBA, players receive 50% of revenue share once the league hits specific benchmarks. Those targets were based on 2019 numbers, compounded by 20% year over year. The league has never hit those marks, not in 2020 during COVID, not in 2021 or 2022 when they were rebuilding attendance, not in 2023 when they had what they thought was a breakthrough season. But 2024, different story entirely.
Single-handedly. I don't want to hear nothing else about other players, about other superstars potentially being a factor, because when you talk about Caitlin Clark, you better put some respect on her damn name. Union leaders also said on Sunday that they will be divvying up $9.25 million to players from licensing revenue generated since 2020 from jersey sales, trading cards, video games, and other merchandise. The union expects to share the money by June the 1st.
Let's be specific about what changed between 2023 and 2024. One name, one rookie class, one player who brought college basketball's biggest fan base directly into the WNBA. Caitlin Clark's Indiana Fever jersey became the second highest selling jersey across both the WNBA and NBA combined. Not second in the WNBA, second across both leagues. Her rookie card sold at auction for more than any female athlete's card in history. Her games averaged 3.2 million viewers on major networks, numbers the league had never approached in regular season play.
They deserve their money. They deserve their cut.
For sure.
They've helped build this league into what it is. That's the one side. The other side is that the owners have been here too. And they're saying over a lengthy period of time, we've been losing money. We ain't trying to lose more. And that's where the lines are drawn in the sand. So what you have to ask yourself as ladies is, look at what you've built and look at all that's happening in the world of sports. Can you afford to jeopardize a season? Yeah. Because in the end, the owners who are not known, who are not in the public eye, who are not public faces for the league, they could sit back and say, hey, we got our money. We ain't trying to lose more. So it hurts the game and we can't make it, but we ain't trying to lose more anyway. You're ladies, you're trying to make this money and you're trying to build off the league. And my advice, and I've said this in the past, would be this. Continue to strive hard to get yours. Be reasonable. Understand where the lines are drawn in the sand and go from there.
Stephen A. Smith laid out the tension perfectly here. The owners have been losing money for decades. They've subsidized this league through 28 years of red ink, waiting for the moment when the product could sustain itself financially. And just when that moment arrives, just when the revenue sharing kicks in, there's talk of players opting out of the CBA to demand more. The timing creates an impossible situation. The owners can legitimately say they've been patient, they've invested, and now that it's finally working, they deserve to see some return before renegotiating everything. But here's what Stephen A. gets right about the players' position. They're the ones who built the foundation. They're the ones who played in empty arenas for $15 a ticket. They're the ones who spent winters overseas because WNBA salaries couldn't cover a year's expenses. And now that the league is finally profitable, they're supposed to wait even longer while ownership recoups decades of losses. That's a hard sell when you're Breanna Stewart or Aja Wilson, watching your prime years tick away while the NBA equivalent players sign $400 million contracts.
But a rising tide lifts all boats.
Yeah.
Whoever is the marketing, whether it's the Caitlin Clark, it's the Unesco's, or anybody else, ride those waves unapologetically, because ultimately it builds the popularity of the league and everyone will benefit in some capacity down the line. It can't always be about what you want in the immediate. You have to have a marathon's point of view as opposed to.
This is the critical part of Stephen A's analysis. Ride the wave unapologetically, whether it's Caitlin Clark or Angel Reese or whoever the marketing engine happens to be. Use that momentum to build the entire league. Because the alternative is what exactly? Downplay the star who's driving revenue because it makes other players uncomfortable? That's not how professional sports works. The NBA didn't hide Michael Jordan because it made other shooting guards feel inadequate. They built the entire league's marketing around him, and everyone benefited from the rising tide.
A sprinter.
Yeah.
So that was Stephen A. Smith speaking about the current situation dealing with these ladies. Now, this article goes into grave detail talking about how they found these figures, how they came up with it. WNBA generated enough revenue in 2025 to trigger revenue sharing with this players. Union leaders told ESPN on Sunday. Union leaders said that the league notified player leadership earlier this month that they hit the benchmark. The 13 teams will receive a total of $8 million from the league to disperse among players. Caitlin Clark single-handedly helped y'all do that, man. The revenue targets in the 2020 CBA were based on 2019 numbers and compound by 20% across subsequent years to COVID pandemic. That's before Caitlin Clark got there. But here you go right here. Under the 2020, players would receive 50% of revenue share defined in the CBA as the amount of revenue threshold minus 30% for expenses. So for the first time in league history, these young ladies is finally finna get some money, and they definitely owe it to CC. Get down in the comments.
The union also announced $9.25 million in licensing revenue to be distributed from sales since 2020. Jersey sales, trading cards, video games, merchandise, and when you look at who's driving those numbers, the concentration is stark. Caitlin Clark's jersey sales dwarf everyone else's. Her trading cards are setting records at auction. Video game companies are suddenly interested in WNBA licensing specifically because they can market her name. This isn't speculation. These are documented sales figures. So when that $9 million gets divided up, understand what's happening. The player who generated the overwhelming majority of that revenue gets the same share as players who sold a fraction of the merchandise. That's how union revenue sharing works, and there's logic to it. Rising tide lifts all boats, but it also creates a situation where the star carrying the financial load might look at her bank account and wonder why she's not seeing compensation that reflects her actual market value.
Section. Let me know y'all thoughts about this one. Make sure y'all keep them bills on. I'm going to keep you up to date. And until next time, man, shake the haters.
Let's talk about what revenue sharing actually means for individual players. $8 million split across 13 teams means each team gets roughly $615,000 to distribute among their roster. Most WNBA rosters carry 11 to 12 players. So we're talking about $50,000 to $60,000 per player as a bonus. For a rookie making $76,000 in base salary, that's significant. For a max player making $240,000, it's nice but not life-changing. Compare that to what Caitlin Clark could command in individual endorsements. She's already signed deals with Nike, Gatorade, State Farm, and others worth millions annually. Her market value as an individual far exceeds what the WNBA's collective system can provide, which creates the fundamental tension in this entire discussion. The union model protects players who don't have star power. It ensures everyone benefits from the league's success, but it also caps the earning potential of the players who are actually driving that success. This is why the CBA negotiation coming up is so critical. The current deal runs through 2027, but players can opt out after the 2025 season. If they do, everything's on the table. Revenue split percentages, salary cap structure, individual versus collective bargaining rights. And the owners know that if players opt out now, right after the first profitable season in league history, it's going to be an ugly negotiation. Here's the broader context that makes this moment so precarious. The WNBA's revenue surge in 2024 wasn't gradual. It wasn't the result of steady growth over multiple years. It was a spike driven by a single rookie class, primarily one player. That's not a sustainable business model. What happens in 2025 if the novelty wears off? What happens if Caitlin Clark gets injured? What happens if the fan base she brought decides they were following her, not the league, and their interest fades when she's not dominating headlines? The smart move for ownership would be to bank this windfall, invest in infrastructure, and build a foundation that can survive beyond one player's impact. The smart move for players would be to strike while the iron is hot, leverage this moment of maximum attention to secure guaranteed money before the bubble potentially deflates. Both positions are rational. Both are looking out for their own interests, and those interests are directly opposed. Stephen A's advice to take the marathon view makes sense if you believe the growth is sustainable, but if you're a player in your prime right now, you don't have time for a marathon. Your career window is 8 to 10 years if you're lucky. You need to maximize earnings now, not wait for some theoretical future where the league's financial foundation is more stable. So here's where this gets uncomfortable for everyone involved. Caitlin Clark is owed an apology. Not from fans, not from media, from her peers in the league who spent the entire 2024 season downplaying her impact. The "it's not just Caitlin" narrative that dominated WNBA discourse for months has been definitively disproven by the revenue numbers. It was just Caitlin. Or at least it was overwhelmingly Caitlin, with some contribution from the Angel Reese rivalry narrative. Angel Reese deserves credit for her role in this. The Clark versus Reese storyline that started in the 2023 NCAA championship game carried directly into the WNBA and drove engagement. But let's be honest about the numbers. Caitlin's jersey sales were multiples of Angel's. Caitlin's games drew higher ratings whether Angel was playing or not. Caitlin's cards sell for higher prices at auction. The data doesn't lie about who was the primary driver, and yet throughout the season, we heard constant pushback against giving Caitlin credit. We heard about how the league was growing before she arrived. We heard about how other rookies were contributing too. We heard Cheryl Swoops question whether Caitlin was even the best player in her draft class. All of that narrative building has now been exposed as wishful thinking. The revenue numbers prove what was obvious to anyone watching objectively. One player changed everything. The apology needs to come from league officials too. Commissioner Kathy Engelbert spent months trying to credit the entire rookie class for the league's growth. She bent over backwards to avoid singling out Caitlin Clark, presumably to avoid alienating other players and their fan bases. That might have been politically smart within the league's internal dynamics, but it was dishonest about what was actually happening. When your league finally becomes profitable for the first time in 28 years, and it happens to coincide with the arrival of one specific player who breaks every attendance and ratings record, you don't get to pretend it's a collective effort. You acknowledge reality, you celebrate the player who made it possible, and you build your entire marketing strategy around maximizing her impact while you have her. The NBA understood this with Magic and Bird in the 80s. They understood it with Jordan in the 90s. They understood it with LeBron in the 2000s. You don't hide your stars, you don't diminish their impact to make other players feel better. You ride the wave as hard as you can, and you use the rising revenue to lift everyone's compensation. Now let's address the counter-argument, because it's not entirely without merit. The players who pushed back against the Caitlin Clark narrative weren't just being petty. They were protecting their own legacies and their own earning potential. If the entire league's success gets attributed to one rookie, what does that say about the players who've been carrying the league for a decade? A'ja Wilson won back-to-back MVPs. Breanna Stewart is a two-time champion and multiple-time Finals MVP. Diana Taurasi built her entire career in the WNBA when nobody was watching. Those players have legitimate claim to being the foundation that made the league's 2024 success possible. Without them building credibility for the product over 15 years, maybe Caitlin's arrival doesn't have the same impact. But here's the thing. You can acknowledge the foundation while also being honest about the catalyst. The WNBA was a stable, low-revenue league before 2024. It wasn't growing. It wasn't breaking through to mainstream audiences. It was a niche product with a dedicated but small fan base. Caitlin Clark changed that overnight. Both things can be true. The veterans built something worth watching. Caitlin brought the audience to watch it. The $8 million revenue share is just the beginning of this conversation. The real question is what happens in the next CBA negotiation. Because the players now have leverage they've never had before. They can point to 2024 and say, look, we proved the product can be profitable. They can demand a higher percentage of revenue. They can push for guaranteed contracts. They can ask for better travel conditions, better facilities, better everything. And the owners are going to counter with, "You proved the product can be profitable when you have a once-in-a-generation star. What happens when she retires? What happens if the next draft class doesn't include anyone with her crossover appeal?" That's the fundamental uncertainty that makes this negotiation so complicated. Is 2024 the new normal, or is it an outlier year that shouldn't be used as the baseline for future projections? If I'm advising the players' union, I'm telling them to opt out after 2025 and negotiate hard. Strike while you have maximum leverage. Get guaranteed money locked in before the market potentially corrects. If I'm advising ownership, I'm telling them to resist any long-term commitments based on 1 year of data. Offer modest increases, but don't commit to revenue-sharing percentages that assume 2024 level income continues indefinitely. Both sides have rational positions, which means this negotiation is going to be brutal. Here's what makes this particularly tricky. The WNBA's revenue surge wasn't evenly distributed across all teams. The Indiana Fever saw massive increases in attendance, merchandise sales, and local media value. Same with teams that played against the Fever frequently. But teams in smaller markets that didn't get many Fever games, their revenue probably didn't spike nearly as much. So when we talk about $8 million in revenue sharing, understand that it's being distributed equally across teams that didn't contribute equally to generating it. The Fever's ownership could make a legitimate argument that they should keep a larger share of the revenue their star player generated. But that's not how league-wide revenue sharing works. It's designed to keep small market teams competitive. This creates resentment. The Fever are subsidizing teams that didn't draw crowds, and those teams know it, which makes league-wide decision-making complicated. When you vote on CBA terms, do the teams that generated the revenue get more say than teams that benefited from revenue sharing? Probably not formally, but the politics of it matter. Let's talk about the $9.25 million in licensing revenue, because that number is actually more significant than the $8 million in revenue sharing. Licensing money comes from jersey sales, trading cards, video games, and other merchandise. That revenue has been accumulating since 2020, which means most of it predates Caitlin Clark. Except it doesn't, because the overwhelming majority of that $9 million was generated in 2024. Jersey sales spiked in 2024. Trading card values exploded in 2024. Video game companies started pursuing WNBA licenses in 2024. So while the union is distributing money that technically accumulated over 5 years, the reality is 1 year generated most of it. And again, one player generated most of that 1 year's revenue. Caitlin Clark's jersey was the second highest seller across the WNBA and NBA combined. Her cards are setting auction records. When EA Sports finally added WNBA players to their NBA 2K game, they marketed it with her face. This isn't subtle. The licensing revenue is directly attributable to her marketability. So when that $9 million gets split evenly among all players, Caitlin Clark is effectively subsidizing players who didn't contribute proportionally to generating that revenue. That's the union model. That's collective bargaining. But it's also why superstar players in every sport eventually push for systems that allow them to capture more of their individual market value. Here's the question nobody wants to ask out loud. What happens if Caitlin Clark decides the WNBA isn't worth it? What if she looks at her endorsement income, looks at her WNBA salary plus revenue sharing, and realizes she could make more money playing in Europe or Asia during the summer while doing endorsements year-round? What if she just retires early to focus on business ventures? It sounds crazy. She just got there. She's 22 years old. But think about the incentive structure. She's making $76,000 in WNBA salary. Even with revenue-sharing bonuses, she's probably clearing less than $200,000 from actually playing basketball. Meanwhile, her endorsement deals are worth millions annually. Those endorsements don't require her to play in the WNBA. They require her to maintain her public profile, which she could do through media appearances, social media, and occasional exhibition games. The WNBA's biggest asset is also its biggest risk. If Caitlin Clark walked away tomorrow, the league's revenue would crater. Attendance would drop, ratings would plummet, jersey sales would collapse, and suddenly, that $8 million revenue-sharing pool disappears, probably forever. The entire financial foundation of the league's future rests on one player choosing to stay engaged. That's a terrifying position for a league to be in, and it's why the next CBA negotiation is so critical. The league needs to give Caitlin Clark a reason to stay that goes beyond your helping grow women's basketball. She needs to be compensated at a level that reflects her actual market value. Otherwise, the economic incentive to leave becomes overwhelming. So here's what this all comes down to. The WNBA just had its first profitable season in 28 years. That's worth celebrating. Players are about to receive revenue-sharing checks for the first time ever. That's significant. But the reason it happened is undeniable, and pretending otherwise insults everyone's intelligence. Caitlin Clark changed everything. One player, one rookie,